Greetings once again, everyone. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electrotech, and here we are once again for this part 2 video regarding this ProScan PSVR 65 VCR. And I decided I'm going to go ahead and go through the process of how I go about servicing this unit here, VCRs in general. And I understand this isn't vintage audio per se, but you know, in all actuality, it is vintage, fairly vintage that is, and there is obviously an audio aspect to this VCR. So this isn't something I'm going to do on a regular basis. You know, like I said, I don't do VCRs too much nowadays, but every once in a while, when I have a serious customer who's really into his or her VHS machine, whatever the case, and they're willing to pay, you know, what it's going to realistically take to properly service a VCR. Then by all means, if I have the time to do it, or I could set aside the time, in this case, I want to help this individual out to get this thing going, so that's why I'm doing it. Okay, so as you can see, I'm soaking these parts, you know, the cam gear, the cam drive gear. So, and I'm just little by little bringing parts into the tray here and spraying them off, loosening up the old grease as I mentioned before. And I'm going to be doing that with all the parts before I end up taking the tray over to the sink and getting all this loose grease off. Now what you see here is referred to as a cam slider, and this cam slider in essence is operated by the drive lever here, okay? And this drive lever, you can see the pin on this drive lever that when it operates this cam slider, the cam slider moves from side to side along the front edge of the chassis. You can see where I'm pointing there. That's the front edge of the VCR chassis. And this, like I said, this cam slider here just kind of slides back and forth. And, you know, its function for the most part is to operate the idler clutch and the gear assembly, and as well as the sub and main brakes for the supply and take-up reels. So that's about it. I'm going to get to some more cleaning, and as I move along, I'll kind of point out how these various parts function together. Okay, so as you saw, all these parts were cleaned, rinsed, dried out, and what I'm doing now is getting ready to apply lubricant to the parts that I'm going to initially start installing. Anyways, I'm going to get started, and what I'm using for a lot of these parts, these plastic parts, is a Dow Corning. It's a Molykote EM30L. It's a synthetic polyolefin grease, and I'm going to be applying that initially to the grooves, the tracks on this cam gear, and then I'm going to be installing it and getting everything mechanically aligned, and I'm going to go through and demonstrate what that is all about. Okay, so before this cam gear is installed, we got to make sure that, you know, this pin here and this pin over here are lined up together so that when the cam is dropped in place, these follower pins on both the loading slider and the cam lever line up properly on the underside of this cam gear into the grooves. Okay, so everything has to be perfectly align in that regard. So let me go ahead and flip this over, and we'll check out the alignment on the underside of the chassis. Okay, so first off, the T guide here and the S guide here, the tape loading guides, in other words, they need to be first off in the forward or eject position, which they are. Okay, so I already slid them forward in the eject position from the underside with the loading slider. So anyways, now I'm going to flip this over, and with these TNS guides here, the loading slider lever should be in alignment, and we're going to take a look at the alignment marks to make sure that's the case again before I drop in the cam lever and so forth and get everything in alignment up top here. Okay, so here we are on the underside, and this is our loading slider here. Okay, and let me go ahead and zoom in just a little bit. See if we can regain some focus here. Okay. All right, there is a indentation here, a little dot, and that in conjunction with the tooth, the gear tooth that you see here, you see there's a space between this tooth and this tooth. Okay. When this tooth here is lined up with the indentation, the circle, that indicates alignment. Also too, when these gears are rotated in opposite directions, this gear here called our S loading gear, the white gear, and this is our T loading gear, the black gear. And there's an arrow on this S loading gear here that mates up with an arrow that is covered by this loading slider. But when it is rotated around, it lines up with the arrow on this gear here, and that also indicates proper alignment. And as you can see, earlier on off camera, I performed some lubrication under here, some cleaning and so forth, and I'm doing that with all the mechanisms as I work my way through. And anyways, let's go ahead and get back to the top side and go from there. Okay, so we're back at the top side, and what I'm pointing at here is right underneath is that loading slider lever that we were just looking at. Okay, and this is the follower pin here from that loading slider that we need to make sure is in alignment. It looks pretty good based on where it should be positioned, of course. And what I need to do right now is drop this cam lever in place over here. Okay, so let me just do a cursory, kind of get this lined up, and then we want to get this rotated over here. This is about right. This is where we want the cam lever. But what's going to happen is I'm going to be dropping on the main cam gear here in just a moment, and this is where it really matters, because these follower pins here, this cam lever follower and this loading slider follower, these pins here, again, and I mentioned this before, have to sit perfect in their grooves when that cam gear is seated into position and aligned. Okay, so all of this has to be aligned on the top side, because remember, on the bottom of this this cam gear, we have those grooves, those channels, and these pins, once again, have to be sitting in their appropriate channel. So, and we'll go ahead and confirm that via the same type of mechanical alignment points, or making sure that everything is in phase. So, anyways, let's go ahead and get to that. Okay, so let's drop our cam gear in place and make sure that we have alignment. Let me kind of work around this camera here. So let me go ahead and drop this on down. Get our alignment hole situated, which is right over here through the gear and down into the chassis. That's our alignment hole, so that's what we want, and everything's looking good there. We have alignment. I'll just keep this punch in place, and we'll move on from there and start installing the rest of the assembly. Okay, again with our punch, keeping everything in alignment, I'm going to go ahead and install this drive lever now, and then the pinch roller. We can start getting this ready to roll. And then there's also a I'll point it out over here. There's a follower pin here that needs to drop into the appropriate groove of the cam gear. So let me go ahead and get this. Mounted in place. Excuse my reach. Okay. Got to work around that camera there. Okay. And let me make sure that pin there is dropped into the appropriate groove. And yes, it is. Just double, triple check. Yep. Okay, the follower pin is in the appropriate groove there. So our drive lever is in place. Now let me get the pinch roller situated and get that in place. Okay, let's get our pinch roller dropped into place here. Okay, and let me make sure that, you go ahead and just zoom in real quick. And make sure that it dropped into the right groove. And I believe, let me check that out. Yeah, it looks like we're in the right groove there. Yep. Okay. Looking good there. So I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of this loading drive assembly all situated here. Get the okay. We have our loading motor here, loading drive motor. We have our worm gear. We have the cam drive gear here, which drops down here. Lever, mode sense switch, and as I install these various parts that make up the remainder of this loading drive mechanism, I'm going to go ahead and apply the appropriate lubricant and the grease, and we'll get everything situated there. Now the mode sense switch, in the first video I mentioned how badly tarnished the outer contacts here, all these outer contacts, okay, how tarnished they were. Everything is nice and clean now. I've applied a very light lubricant over the contacts, and so I'm going to get this soldered back to the PCB here, and we'll get this this mode switch gear. Once I get it snapped back into position, we'll get everything aligned properly, and then once the assembly is all put back together, then we'll go ahead and position it over the cam gear here, over the main gear, and again make sure everything is in proper alignment, and then move forward from there in getting the tape loading assembly all situated, and everything else that needs to be relubricated, cleaned and relubricated a little bit further, we'll go ahead and get that done as well. Okay, so I dropped this mode switch back into the PCB here. You can see these two plastic posts that just snap in place, and then there's the pins that I need to solder back to the board, and the mode switch gear here is snapped back in place. Its own contacts are in contact with the mode switch contacts that I showed you a moment ago that I cleaned up and what have you. Also too, you'll notice I'm going to try to zoom in and see what happens, see if it, I'm looking at the back of the camera here and seeing if it starts to get blurry, and let me just get to the point where it's sharp enough. Okay, I think right there maybe. You can see this little blue arrow here, okay? Now this little blue arrow has to be brought into alignment with, I don't know if you can see this little white arrow. You see this little notch right here? You see the black ring here, and it's notched right in here. Well, right in the middle of that notch, I don't know if you can see that white arrow, but I need to bring the blue arrow on this mode switch gear ring here into alignment there. So again, the importance of all of these mechanisms being in alignment as I've been going through and doing, as I've been reassembling everything, because once I get this loading drive assembly all put back together, you know, I still have a few parts going in. I'm going to apply some grease as mentioned, get everything lubricated, snap back into place and so forth. Once that's done and everything's in alignment, as I've demonstrated already and as I have been demonstrating, then we're going to situate the remainder of that loading drive assembly back over this sorry about that, I'm trying to get this tripod situated here. Okay, so the remainder of that loading drive assembly, that housing there, is going to snap back over the cam gear. As you can see, I have that punch drop down through that alignment hole, and so everything's in alignment here. When I set the remainder of that, again, loading drive assembly housing in place, everything's just going to line up perfect, okay? And that's how it has to be for the whole mechanism to function properly. So here we are, everything is put back together mechanically, and if you remember where I left off, I was messing around with this loading drive assembly housing here and getting everything put back together, you know, mode sense switch, the cam drive gear over here, and so forth. So let me just briefly explain how this kind of all goes back together. It would have been nice if I was, you know, able to show you in terms of me snapping this back in place, but that's really all that that I did. Okay, there was nothing fancy going on here. Once I got everything back together within this housing, and there was only, you know, there's only this loading drive motor which sits underneath here. It has a worm drive gear that extends outward this way from it, and off to the side over here is that cam drive gear that I also pointed out earlier, okay, which meshes up with the teeth of the worm gear. So the outer teeth, well, there's only outer teeth on this cam drive gear, mesh up with this worm drive gear. So when this motor fires up and starts rotating, and the worm drive in turn is rotating, that of course rotates the cam drive gear, which in turn rotates, now let me get this kind of into view here and tilted. Okay, so you can probably see, I'll zoom in a little bit. Okay, so I'm sure you can see down in here, this is our cam drive gear, the big main cam gear. Not cam drive gear, just cam gear. This is the cam drive gear's shaft right here, and you can see its teeth down here mesh up with the the cam gear's outer gear teeth, okay? Now this cam gear, the main gear, has some outer teeth that you're looking at there, and it also has some inner teeth, okay? Back in there, all right? And probably, I don't know if you can see back in here where I'm pointing, you might be able to see those blue gear teeth back in there. Those mesh up with the inner gear teeth of that main cam gear that I was just referring to, okay? Okay, so the cam drive gear here, we were just looking at the shaft of it that was meshing up with the outer gear teeth of the, you know, the main cam gear. And then those blue gear teeth of the mode sense switch are meshing up with the inner gear teeth of that main cam gear, so that when the main cam gear is rotating, that's also rotating the mode sense switch. Okay, and that mode sense switch, as I explained before, is what communicates the position of the main cam gear to the microprocessor. So that, you know, and that's why alignment of all these mechanical parts, all these gears, are crucial, because if things were out of alignment, then it just wouldn't work. Okay, so I'm going to stop this video here, and until I get the belt, which should be coming in a few days or so, there's not too much more that I'm going to do other than clean the case out and the you know, the main circuit board, especially that power supply section. It's pretty filthy, a lot of dust and debris throughout, so there's no point in mounting this freshly cleaned and re-lubricated chassis into a filthy case and onto a filthy circuit board. So that's that. I do suspect that once the belt is reinstalled and everything is you know, put back in place, that this VCR will function fine. It was functioning fine before it left the shop the first time, like I said, and I tested it several times here in the shop. When the customer got it home, it was working as well. I think the belt just came loose. I determined that the belt was, you know, a bit worn, it was overstretched, and I say that I think it was the belt because, you know, I did find the belt laying loose in the case, but could that have happened when I was disassembling things and separating the, you know, starting to separate the chassis from the circuit board and pull everything from the case? There's that possibility, but I really do think that the belt came off when the customer had it in his possession, and hence that's the reason why it ceased to function as it should. So again, though, the reason why I went the rest of the distance is A, the customer was willing to put the budget into that, and I figured that since I was in this unit already and I had to perform the level of disassembly that I did perform, might as well just get it done. The first time around, I performed a basic cleaning of the mechanisms that were accessible, but I obviously went beyond that, as you saw in the video. So I believe everything should function fine. So let's just hope that that's the case and there's nothing else wrong that I'm unaware of, but I don't think so, because like I said, it was functioning when it left the shop the first time, and it was functioning well. So anyways, I was hoping that I would have a few more videos to post, both on my website and of course YouTube here, because, you know, I host my videos on YouTube that I embed on my website. So I was hoping to have a few videos posted, and I would have in regard to some audio gear that I'm working on, but I had an incident happen last Sunday at my home involving a masked intruder.
So of course I had to devote some time to my home, my family, and all that. And in a nutshell, what had happened was in the early evening we had a masked intruder enter through the front door of our house, because we were expecting my in-laws, who live in the apartment next door. It's a large house with a split floor plan, an apartment next door for the in-laws. There's 2 staircases on each half of the of the house, both apartments, if you will. And so we had left our door open, expecting my father-in-law to come over to get some dinner. They're elderly, they have health issues and all that, so we take care of them. And we heard the door open around that time, coincidentally, and we were wondering why there was a bit of a delay in him entering from the hallway into the living room and on through to get the dinner. And so my wife had got up to check on things and walked out into the hall, and she came across a masked intruder slinking up the stairs. Of course, she was frightened, and she alerted me, and I jumped up and in short evacuated her out of the house. I won't get into a lot of details, but I'm trained to handle those kind of situations. And anyways, I had to assume, as I think most logical people would, that this individual, who was obviously a nut, was there to bring bodily harm or perhaps death to us. You have to assume that when somebody enters your home in that manner, especially wearing a mask and all that. So I evacuated her out of the house, out the back. And my shop building is on the same property as my house, so I ushered my wife to safety in my shop. She got on the phone to call her parents on the other side of the house, as mentioned. And while she was doing that and also calling 911, I secured a 12-gauge shotgun and went around the side porch to her parents' side and met up with her parents and made sure that they were safe. And then I regained control of my house and actually did meet up with the intruder coming down the other stairs toward my in-laws' apartment. Had he entered their house, and being that they're elderly and in poor health, I can't even imagine what would have happened, whether they would have had heart attacks or whatever, or this individual would have hurt them or whatever the case. But like I said, I met up with him coming down the stairs on their side. I took control of him and ordered him to keep his hands where I could see him, ordered him to the bottom of the stairs, put him on his knees, had him keep his hands in plain sight, and I resolved the situation without anybody getting hurt, without having to administer any lethal force or whatever the case. So all ended well as far as that goes, but my wife has been very frightened since then, so I've been spending more time in the house. I'm not out in the shop as late as I was before, and she's having a hard time moving through the house, especially when it's dark in certain rooms. So I've had to just kind of get her through that and help her through that, and she's doing a little bit better, but something like that is very traumatic, and it even put me on edge, as you can imagine. And so anyways, the point is that I haven't been doing as much in the shop since that time. I have been in here working off and on a little bit, of course, because I have so much to do. I have so much work, and I've fallen behind on it. That's just the nature of being a one-man show and having to take on a lot of other things besides the shop and just life in general. So I think a lot of you folks understand that. And but that's what happened last week anyways, and I'm getting back on track, and I just wanted to at least get this video out in the meantime, even though I still have a little bit more to do. But that's just going to be, like I said, audio video testing when the time comes, and and I'll explain the function of things in a little bit more detail, like I already touched on at that time. But other than that, this is wrapped up as far as I'm concerned. I've done all I can do with this VCR. I'm pretty sure it's going to work out just fine. But that's it. That's all I can do at this point, and I don't think there's any more budget to go any further if there was anything wrong. For example, like with the electronics, if something's starting to malfunction in the circuitry, because there is a lot of integrated circuitry, and it's microprocessor controlled and so forth and so on. So the mechanics seem fine at this point, so we'll just see once again. So I'm just gonna cut it here. You guys take care of yourself in the meantime. Like I always say, peace, love, rock and roll, and of course vintage audio. And that's coming up soon. A lot more really cool pieces of audio equipment. So really, everyone, take care of yourselves in the meanwhile.